afternoon and welcome. I'm Anita Huberman. I'm President and CEO of the Surrey Board of Trade and an honorary captain of the Royal Canadian Navy. Thank you so much for attending our annual Surrey Development Industry Dialogue. Thank you. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are on the traditional and unceded territory of our Coast Salish people, specifically the Kwantlen, Katzie, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Kaiket, Coquitlam, and also our Inuit and Métis peoples. They have a profound connection to the land and water that surrounds our great city of Surrey. And Surrey Board of Trade events simply would not happen without sponsorship support. And I greatly thank their support of Surrey's City Building Business Organization. Our co-presenting sponsors for this afternoon are Century Group and Rogers Business. A round of applause, please. Our lunch sponsor is the BM Group of Companies. Our supporting sponsors are Applin and Martin Consultants, Blue City Construction, Tien Shared Group of Companies, and Unity. Thank you so much. And our community sponsors are BC Housing, the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board, and LMS Reinforcing Steel. We also have amazing special guests that I'd like to recognize in the room this afternoon. And of course, Canada's Minister of Housing and Diversity and Inclusion for the Government of Canada, Mr. Ahmed Hassan. Ken Hardy, MP for Fleetwood Port Kells. Representing John Eldag, MP of Cloverdale Langley City, is Kyle Latchford. And Mayor-elect for the City of Surrey, Brenda Law. And City of Surrey Councillor Linda Annis. Everyone, on behalf of the Surrey Board of Trade, our Board Chair, Mr. Belgi Dhaliwal, is also in the House. We'd like to thank you for supporting Surrey City Building Business Organization. I also see Randeep Sarai has just arrived, our Member of Parliament for Surrey City Centre. In addition to supporting business, bringing business into the city, we're also focused on the livability of our city so that everyone can live, learn, work, and play in our great city of Surrey. We're going to be the largest city in British Columbia very soon, and with a wide variety of great economic assets. And I always say that every single person in this economy matters, and that's why we're so pleased to also support the Center for Child Development galas. There's a Center for Child Development, and they're having a gala on November 19th, and I strongly ask you to consider purchasing tickets. They provide specialized rehabilitation services to our children in our community, persons with disabilities, providing supports for families, providing supports for families that are facing domestic abuse. You want to support this organization, November 19th in the evening is the place to be. Of course, in addition to the City of Surrey's tree lighting ceremony also earlier that evening. But we want to make sure that you look at the Center for Child Development's website and purchase those tickets. Thank you so much for their great work. So I'm going to actually invite Canada's Minister of Housing to speak first before I launch and release our red tape report, because he has to leave at 12:30. So I'm going to ask, and please give a great warm Surrey welcome to Minister Ahmed Hassan.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. And before I begin, I'd also like to acknowledge that we're all gathered in person here in the unceded traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples. Hello everyone, good afternoon, bonjour tout le monde. I wanted to just bring you back to the last time I was here. It was in early July in Surrey, and I was over on 99th Avenue, just a 15-minute walk from here. And it was a great day, not just because of the better weather, but it was, it was much warmer than today. But we were also there, and it was a great day because of what we were there to announce. And we were there with Ken Hardy and members of council. And there we announced 85 new permanently affordable homes for residents of Surrey. And I can't stress enough how important those units made people feel, the future residents of that development. The fact that they would have access to safe, affordable housing that really meets their needs across the housing spectrum. And I have to really pay tribute to the friends and colleagues I've had from this part of Canada. Ken Hardy, Sue Davenport, my good friend John Alvac, as well as my good friend, Member of Parliament, Surrey Senator Randeep Sarai. All of them have been talking about housing, but not just affordable housing, but housing across the spectrum of housing, whether it is making sure that we're able to house those who are experiencing homelessness, whether it is providing deeply affordable housing for the most vulnerable in our communities, whether it's providing more rental stock for people who need access to affordable rental units, but also keeping the dream of home ownership alive. Randeep and I have spoken a lot about that. How do we continually tweak our finance and other policies to ensure that we're always keeping that door open for first-time home buyers, for young families, for young individuals who want to be able to own a home. And as a government, we have to keep our eye on all of those different aspects of the housing spectrum. Why is that? It's because people need stability. I'll begin by just saying that, something that I feel I should repeat everywhere that I go. In the G7 countries, Canada has the fastest growing population, both domestically but also through immigration. We have record immigration targets every single year because we understand that we need immigration to fill the over 1 million jobs that are unfilled now in Canada. But that fast pace of population growth is not matched, quite frankly, by our housing supply. We have a supply shortage problem in Canada, which leads to price increases and rental rate increases, and simply just not having enough rental or other supply to meet the demands of people. And you see that it's not just, the pressures are not just on home ownership. Now they're also on those who are trying to rent a place that they, not only they can afford, but actually meets all their needs with respect to being close to work, school, and other community services. And today, in a world that is really uncertain, we need to work hard together, private sector, government, non-profit sector, to make sure that people understand and know that their hard work and their hard-earned dollars will amount to something in their lives that is just more than getting by. We need to make sure that people have the stability to not just get by, but actually get ahead. And housing gives you that peace of mind. Housing gives you the stability to start to plan for a better future. Whether it is to save for your kids' education, whether it is to open a business, whether it is to pursue that dream job. Canadians want to make sure that their dreams of a better life for themselves and their families are supported by their government. And that starts with having a safe and affordable roof over your head. But let's be honest about it. That dream of home ownership is increasingly out of reach. And at the end of the day, Canadians expect solutions from all of us. And they're looking to some of the people in this room and beyond to come up with those solutions, to come up with innovative ways to continue to give them that opportunity to ensure that their hard-earned dollars can ensure them access to home ownership. So our government came in 2015, and we noticed that the federal government before us had, quite frankly, vacated the national government's role in housing. So we felt that it was really important for the government of Canada to get back into the housing game. Housing, as you know, is multidimensional. It is also multi-jurisdictional. There's a role for the provinces and territories, there's a role for the cities, there's a role for the federal government. And none of us can do it alone. There's also, of course, a big role for the private sector, the non-profit sector. So what did we do? We spent about a year and a half talking to Canadians and saying, what would you like the federal government to do? How do you think we can provide both the resources and the federal leadership to get Canadians housed? And the first thing that we heard was what was not working. They said that first, the federal government needs to get back into housing in a big way by putting significant resources on the table. Second thing we heard was that those resources have to be over a long period of time so that communities can have access to reliable and certain funding, stable funding over many years. The other thing that we heard was that taking all the federal housing dollars and flowing them through provinces and territories was not working. They said you need to do a little bit of that, but we also need the federal government to have the flexibility to be able to partner directly with local communities, whether it's a private developer, whether it's a nonprofit, whether it's a municipality. We needed to have that flexibility. And so we took all that feedback and we came up with the National Housing Strategy, a 10-year plan that we introduced in 2017 that has now grown to over $72 billion. $72 billion to make sure that we are investing in housing across the spectrum, from tackling homelessness all the way to home ownership. And in the years since, we've been investing very heavily in direct initiatives between the federal government and nonprofits and the private sector, but also flowing dollars through municipalities and our provincial and territorial partners. Here in Surrey, it has meant that we've supported the creation of over 1,000 new affordable housing units in places like Kingston Gardens or 99th Avenue, or Arterial Women's Resource Society's Little 2 building that's providing supportive housing for women in the city. So it's not just about, when I talked about how we can't do it alone, we provide mainly the capital to build a massive number of units across the country. But the supportive services and the wraparound supports that are needed by individuals who sometimes need more than a home must be provided by other orders of government. And that's how we partner together. And these investments are not just changing the lives of the people who inhabit those homes. We are changing the communities that these people are experiencing homelessness in. So I'll give you an example. In Toronto, I was announcing 1,000 rapidly built homes a few months ago. And one of the folks who was there criticized us for spending a lot of money to build those 1,000 homes for people experiencing homelessness. And beside me was one of the heads of the University Health Network in Toronto. And this is a group of hospitals that are mainly located in downtown Toronto. And within those hospitals, they had done a study which had indicated that 200 people experiencing homelessness in a chronic manner were responsible for 15,000 emergency hospital visits in 1 year. Now, imagine the costs of that, and imagine the savings we could realize as a society and as a community if those 200 people were permanently housed. They wouldn't need to go 15,000 times. And for 200 people to have 15,000 emergency hospital visits, it means that some of them were going more than once to the emergency room of those hospitals. So this is not just, finding permanent housing solutions for the most vulnerable members of our society. It's not just the humane thing to do. It's not just the right thing to do morally. It's fiscally important. And you actually save more money in healthcare costs, in saved healthcare costs, criminal justice, policing, and so on. And not only that, you actually turn people into, you give people the stability that they need to turn their lives around and start rebuilding again. This morning I started my day at Hogan's Alley, where there's three-story building of 52 one-bedroom units, where this modular housing project was put up in 4 months. 4 months between the time that it was conceived to people moving in. And the first time I visited Hogan's Alley, the people who were living there were on the street 4 months prior. But you already saw from the interactions, some of them were already had a job. There was a woman who worked at a catering business who was on her way out into independent housing. There were others who were going back to school. These were people who had hope again, and they had the stability to restart their lives. Don't we want everyone in our community to achieve their full potential? Absolutely. And that's what housing can provide. So federally, we keep adding more investments into housing because we know the crucial role that housing can play, not just in enabling people to find stability, which I just talked about, but in economic development. In Canada now, particularly in the major cities, you have investors who are second-guessing whether they can choose our local communities or not, based on the fact that, based on the fear that the future workers will not be able to have a place to rent. And so we need to fix we need to really address the housing challenges together, and not just see it as a challenge, but as an opportunity, because if we partner together and we find the solutions that are necessary to be faster, to be better, to deliver housing, to first of all approve housing faster. It shouldn't take 6 years to build a purposely built rental building around transit. And second, if we deliver housing faster and we are more ambitious together, then we can not only unlock housing for Canadians, we can actually contribute to our own economic development. And that is why in Budget 2022, for the first time, the federal government, all the programs we have in the National Housing Strategy are about funding housing directly, either in partnership with a private sector developer or a municipality or an NGO or the province. But for the first time in Budget 2022, we're introducing a fund called the Housing Accelerator Fund. It's the first time that we will be attacking housing from the system side of things. And because we don't have jurisdiction over municipalities, we will be incentivizing them to approve and deliver housing faster and in a more accelerated way. And so this is $4 billion that will be going primarily to municipalities. And the idea there is to incentivize municipalities to embrace transit-oriented development, intensification around transit centers, making sure that permits are issued faster, making sure that the planning process and other barriers to faster development are removed in a way that actually makes sense, like adopting inclusionary zoning when it makes sense. And so part of that, of course, is tackling NIMBYism, but part of it is also acknowledging that many of our municipal partners, if not all of them, are facing fiscal and financial pressures. They lack the capacity to do the things that they would actually want to do. We're not forcing them to do something they would not want to do, but this is about increasing their own capacity to do the very things that they've always wanted to do. So we will be looking for them to come up in order to access this $4 billion program, which by the way is optional. If you don't want to include transit-oriented development, if you don't want to improve the processing time of your permits and deliver housing faster, and you want to be, you want to do the same old, that's fine. You don't have to access this money. But we will work with the municipalities that show ambition and match, if not exceed, our own ambition to deliver more housing. And through the Housing Accelerator Fund, we want to unlock an additional 100,000 new homes in the next 2 years, and hopefully make systemic changes to how housing is approved and delivered so that we can double the number of new homes built in Canada in the next 10 years. And no one knows how cities can do better rather than the cities themselves. And so each city's plan to access the Housing Accelerator Fund will be different from other cities. But what we're looking for is a comprehensive plan that includes changes in policy, changes in the way housing is approved and delivered. Do you have a plan for additional growth? Do you have a plan for purposely built rental? Do you have a plan to build more additional middle-class housing? Do you have a plan for affordable housing? And yes, do you have a plan to intensify and reach density where it makes sense? And so that comprehensive plan will be that municipality's presentation to the Government of Canada to access that $4 billion. And in exchange, our job is to then support you to be able to invest in your own internal processes to hopefully achieve and exceed that plan. We all know that housing is foundational to a thriving individual and a thriving community, a prosperous community and a prosperous Canada. And together I know we can build not only a stronger and more vibrant city here, but a stronger and more vibrant Canada. Housing and access to housing is huge in terms of not just giving people a chance to restart their lives and actually succeed, but also local economic development. And as I said when I was starting out, that when I say we can't do it alone, I know the federal government has a lion's share in the job, so do the provinces and municipalities, but the private sector has a huge role here as well. And your job, I think, is to look at what some of the programs that exist in this $72 billion national housing strategy and to ask yourself, how can I partner and leverage federal housing dollars to build more mixed housing, to build more purposely built rental units right here in Surrey and across the mainland. You know, as I do, and I don't have to tell you, that we're facing significant housing pressures in many of the major cities, particularly in places like the Lower Mainland. And without you, we wouldn't be able to overcome that challenge. But with you, we're that much closer to building the housing that everyone needs in the Lower Mainland. And I want to say that the private sector, I find, for those who are aware of the federal housing programs, they use them and they use them very effectively, like the Rental Construction Financing Initiative. Even though British Columbia's population is about 12 to 15% of the Canadian population, you have received over 30% of the federal dollars through the Rental Construction Financing Initiative. This is a $25 billion program. So you're punching above your weight already, and those are all private developers, by the way. But I'm never satisfied with 30%. I think you can go higher. And you should use the other programs as well, like the National Housing Co-Investment Fund, the Innovation Fund. We have a fund that allows you to bring any idea forward, whether it's a model of a house, whether it's an idea, whether it's an app, Affordable Housing Innovation Fund. Any idea that leads to access to more housing in your community, we will fund it through this Affordable Housing Innovation Fund. We have a $1.5 billion new money coming to build more co-ops across the country. British Columbia has a history and a good tradition of embracing co-ops, and here's a chance for those in the room who are interested in that. $1.5 billion coming your way. Make sure you use it. And then finally, the Rapid Housing Initiative, an idea that really came about because of COVID. We had to come up with a way to build housing rapidly. And the Rapid Housing Initiative only has two conditions. Can you build housing in 12 months or less, if we give you money? And you have to make sure that the units you build will help vulnerable people. And I can tell you, during COVID, the Rapid Housing Initiative was only supposed to be a one-time deal. But it worked so well and it exceeded all its targets that the government did a second round, and now a third round of the Rapid Housing Initiative is coming. And in both of those rounds, Surrey did well. In the first round, we provided $16 million directly to the city of Surrey to unlock 44 permanently affordable housing units. And then in the second round, Surrey received $13.8 million to unlock 30 affordable housing units. And this is just the city stream. In the project stream, there's an opportunity even for more. In the rental construction financing initiative, the community of Surrey has received $45 million through the National National Housing Co-Investment Fund, $29 million to unlock 85 units, as I said earlier. Through co-ops, $166 million over the years, and so on and so forth. So the federal government, when it comes to housing, has always been present in this community. We've done a lot together. I think we can do even more with the new mayor-elect, as well as the private sector, the non-profit sector in this community. I want to leave you with one reassurance. We will always be a reliable, stable, predictable partner and funder for anything that you want to do in housing in Surrey. Know that the Government of Canada is not only back in the housing space, but is back in a big way. We're backed by significant federal dollars, but we want you to raise your ambition, and we want you to look at us to leverage federal dollars to build more affordable housing in Surrey as a way to not only help people, but to economically develop this place and lead to a more prosperous and stronger Surrey. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Minister. And it was such a unique opportunity to meet the Minister in Ottawa when we were visiting a few weeks ago, and to talk about making sure that Surrey is on the map in terms of housing solutions and collaboration and partnerships with our city of Surrey. So thank you so much, Minister, for being here in Surrey. So I'm going to ask our panelists to come forward, including Mayor-elect Locke, to take their seats on stage. There's a few items that I'd like to get through before we go to the panelists, but if I can ask you to approach the stage, please, now. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to release just very generally the results of our annual Red Tape Survey report. It was sent to the membership and of course to the media this morning. And it does give us a baseline of our members' perceptions to measure how different levels of government can have the opportunity to improve processes, to reduce that red tape regulation that erodes our bottom line. Our developers, our construction agents, architects, engineers, all of the ancillary industries that build housing, that build our commercial properties, who are all a part of Surrey's economic foundation. And I think we all need to work together between the private and public sector to ensure that your developments are approved more efficiently and the costs of doing business are reduced, especially in these very challenging economic times. So just very generally on screen, you'll see that the operating costs in our survey, 50% of our members responded to this survey. We have 6,000 member contacts that we sent this survey to. Operating costs have increased as a result of COVID-19, inflation, and supply chain issues. The confidence in business sales and growth. Businesses are neutral or confident in business growth and sales at this time. The most costly stage of compliance is preparing the information to the different levels of government, and understanding the obligations are the most costly stages. Sometimes you have to speak to different staff in order to comply. Sometimes the instructions change at different levels. Government at all levels, they need to be more clear on their instructions. The overall cost of compliance over the last 2 years, close to just 76%, let's say, have indicated that their cost of compliance has increased in the last 2 years. This is consistent with all of our previous surveys. Ladies and gentlemen, costs just continue to increase. As we rate the cost of compliance, the highest cost associated with compliance is the employment of workers. We in the construction sector, the development sector, you are facing significant labor and skill shortages. And our Surrey Labor Market Intelligence reports that we release every 2 months, it does reflect that your industry is in need of labor, and we need to have those trifecta economic partnerships between training, placement in your businesses, and access to that labor pool. The greatest impact on reducing the cost of compliance is better consultation. Agencies sharing information are at the top of the list to reduce that cost of compliance. The level of red tape in dealing with federal and provincial regulatory authorities, CRA, and WorkSafe BC rank the highest for the level of red tape, and that is really consistent from our previous survey. So nothing has changed really in every single survey that we've had in the past 8 years that we've been doing this. The level of red tape in dealing with various local government regulations, building and construction permits from submission to completion, the public hearing process, complaints and resolutions rank the highest for level of red tape at the local government. So everyone, that's just a snapshot of the survey. It's a 15-page report. It's on our website at businessinsurrey.com. And you know, we're here, our panelists, of course, Canada's Minister of Housing, to work together to reduce that red tape. And we are calling for all levels of government to implement a red tape reduction minister or some type of red tape reduction representative. We need to cut that red tape. We need to make sure that Surrey, our province, and our nation is a nation full of opportunity, a city full of opportunity. So I urge you to take a look at our report, and thank you so much for listening. So I'm going to welcome, our sponsors, as I mentioned at the top of the event, are really focused on supporting our city of Surrey. And they don't only, they're not here just for a profile and recognition. They are a part of Surrey's city building economic paradigm. So I'd like to welcome, first of all, Gordon Bell. He is the solution specialist for Rogers Communications, our co-presenting sponsor, to say a few words. Please help me welcome him.
Thank you. It's a great honor to be here today and speak to you. I only have 3 minutes, but I'll try not to talk fast. When I woke up this morning, I had no idea. I thought I was coming here having lunch. We actually had another individual lined up to speak to you, one of our great experts from Ontario, and he fell ill. So I am going to show you his presentation. Fingers crossed. There's a video. I hope it's all rated okay. Let's flip to the next slide, and let's just watch this really quick video, please.
The way we live and work has changed. The world is connected and always on. The buildings you manage need to evolve to keep pace. Busy tenants and employees expect homes and workplaces that are safe and responsive to their needs. Renewed focus on the environment, including regulations and incentives, makes sustainability essential, reinforcing the need for cost-effective solutions. Smart building technologies help reduce energy costs and consumption by up to 50%. You can remotely monitor the buildings you manage, receiving alerts when an intruder is detected or a component is in need of repair. This ensures that all of your staff are deployed effectively. Collecting real-time data will make property operations even more efficient, as artificial intelligence and machine learning help solve problems and allocate resources automatically. Predictive maintenance, for example, helps increase the lifespan of equipment and infrastructure, while AI-optimized systems like HVAC and plumbing significantly improve your building's efficiency. This will have a direct impact on occupants, reducing CO2 emissions, personalizing wayfinding, optimizing cleaning and sanitizing of washrooms, and enhancing security while preserving privacy. All of these solutions improve both physical and mental well-being. Businesses benefit by attracting a loyal customer base. Employers benefit from modern, sustainable amenities that keep their teams happy, engaged, and productive. Rogers for Business has joined leaders in smart building solutions to help you design, implement, and manage next-generation systems for both existing properties and new builds. Let's take your building into the future today.
Kind of sound like a Tesla, didn't it? Thank you. So the importance there is that we heard all the buzzwords. We hear technology, we hear artificial intelligence, and it's all real. And this is it's a good way of bringing sustainability into a building. So if you take a look at this slide, what that whole video was talking about was indoor air quality. I'm not going to go into smart washrooms because if we're building a high-rise for residential, we're not really going to worry about the smart washrooms. But there is a side of the washrooms we will worry about. I'll get to that in a minute. But we'll be looking at security, we're looking at analytics, we're looking at smart utilities. The smart utilities is very, very important. I think most people are aware of that. This is where we're looking at air quality inside a building. This is important for a residential building as it is in an office building. We have the air quality, we're looking at the HVAC systems, we're looking at the lighting. All of these things can be looked at in a way of more like a dashboard, if you will. So we have sensors everywhere. This is there today. Every building you're in, your hot water tank in your house has at least 3 sensors in it and a blinking light. If that light is out, something's wrong. If the light blinks once every 3 seconds, your pilot light's working, you're good to go. So what we do with these technologies in the larger building, the larger environment, is we grab all of those data inputs from these different sensors, and they're disparate sensors. They're coming from all different areas in the building. And we try to make sense of that and give you proper insights and proper alerts. Why is that important? Well, if my HVAC system breaks down in my building today, and I don't have some technology in place, I'm inconveniencing everybody in that building, all of my tenants. They don't have heat, or they may not have air conditioning, and it happens to be hot in the summertime. So what do? We wait for a maintenance person to come along and be able to fix that. Likely we can get somebody quite quickly, but now they need parts, everything is messed up. But if we take a different approach to it, and we are reading the sensors, we're reading that data, and we're sending that to the right people, i.e. the HVAC vendor, they're preempting anything that could go wrong. They already know that, oh, I have equipment in this building, and the conducive conductor, I'm making something up here, has just worn out or is about to wear out. We need to ship one over there and get somebody to go and fix that before it actually breaks. That's where the efficiencies come in place with technology and sensors, and that's where you save money, and you're also talking about the health and safety of all of your tenants. If we take a look at, how am I doing for time? Done? Okay. Well, we're not going to get to that note, we're not going to get to that note, we're not going to get to that note, but let's wrap up with one conversation around the $4 billion fund that we heard about a bit earlier. So that is going to be innovation and construction around transit centers. We're already seeing that today. We're not building homes that are single family homes. We're building high rises. We're talking about large buildings that are going to be constructed. So as we think about sustainability around those buildings, it really is, it actually behooves us to take a look at the technology, make sure that what is inside that building is serving our tenants properly. Thank you.
So there is innovation at work to help build our city as well. Thank you so much, Gordon, from Rogers Communications. To speak about our co-presenting sponsor, Century Group. They're a family-owned real estate development and property management company with a mission to curate places for that people love. For over 65 years, I know Century Group, very familiar to you, has built a portfolio of operating real estate assets of land, residential rental properties, senior residences, hotels and restaurants, including our very own Civic Hotel in downtown Surrey, commercial retail spaces, emphasizing a mixed-use approach. Their expertise lies in creating livable neighborhoods, from residential towers and townhomes to independent living communities for seniors. Century Group is pleased to be here with Blue City Construction, which is part of their group of companies. Thank you so much for your co-presenting support. Thank you. And of course, another familiar face here in the city of Surrey. I now welcome Peter Fassbender, Corporate Ambassador for the BM Group of Companies, our lunch sponsor, to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much, Anita, and I'm delighted to be here. Surrey is very close to my heart, as it is for the BM Group of Companies. And I don't know if all of you know, but BM Group now has 18 corporate entities under its banner. Everything from construction-related work, concrete supply, and one of the major things that all of you can relate to in this room is the development of homes for people who live in British Columbia and across the country. And Balraj Man, Jasbir Man, and Millen Man are here today. Give them a big hand for their commitment to this community as well. And I will say this on behalf of Balraj and Jasbir and Millen. Talk comes easy, action is what makes things happen. The BM Group, like many of you in this room, are people who are of action. They want to work with communities, they want to work with provincial governments and federal governments to deliver affordable and realistic housing to people in this community and throughout the Lower Mainland. So their commitment to each of you is to continue to build homes as they have up to now, and we'll work with all of you to make sure that we supply homes and affordable homes to people that meets the needs in our communities. They're a great group of organization and of people. They have thousands of employees. They have operations here in Canada, the United States, and in India, and a company that you will continue to watch grow and expand because they are an organization of action. Thank you very much on their behalf.
Peter, into the BM Group of Companies. So as you know already, today's event is focused on the housing crisis in BC. The city of Surrey is going to be the largest city in British Columbia very soon. But our housing crisis continues to worsen and shows no sign of abating. With home ownership and much needed rental units slipping out of reach for many in the province, Governments must take urgent action to reverse this trend. The evidence is clear and supported by many experts in our economy that there is not enough supply to meet the needs of British Columbians. No one factor has created this situation, but one aspect of the predicament should be easy to solve. It's taking governments too long to approve the housing that we need. Our panelists that we have on stage are going to be speaking about collaboration, solutions, partnerships, and innovation. And we need to move the dial forward. Our economy, our workforce demands it. And we did have some panelists, including from the BC government, that were scheduled to be here this afternoon, but they fell ill. But I want you to know that even though there is no BC government representative today, I did speak to them this morning. They are committed to the city of Surrey. I know Mayor-elect Locke is going to speak to that in terms of conversations that she's had with the province already. But this really is a collaboration between all levels of government, including our regional government, the private sector, and our business community in general to drive our economic agenda forward. So first, I'm going to ask Mayor-elect for the city of Surrey, please help me welcome Brenda Locke.
Well, thank you, Anita, and I think I'm going to start by saying I am excited about a renewed relationship between the Surrey Board of Trade and the City of Surrey, so I want to say that to you, Anita, and to Baljeet. It's important that we establish that, and I think we have already. I also want to recognize Councillor Annis is in the room, and I also would like to just say the word elect means that I'm still on a honeymoon period, so be kind. But with us here today, too, if you want to go after anybody, the city manager's here, and you can go hit up Vince. Vince Gallant is over there. I mean, he stuck up his hand just barely. But I am excited to be here today, so thank you for inviting me. And as Anita said, Surrey is growing, we're growing fast. We actually grew by 44% between 06 and 2021, which has far exceeded what most other cities do. Even during the pandemic, we had a record number of building permits, and that's quite incredible. Last year, we were over $2 billion. So there's no question that Surrey is building, our construction is booming, but are we always building the right thing? I think that's some questions we have to sometimes ask ourselves. But in Surrey, we have the opportunity to make a big leap, to bring a wide range of housing to the city, and that means more low-income housing, more affordable rentals, and as Minister Hussain said, more co-ops. But in order to get there, we need to do this together, and that's where all levels of government come into play. Certainly, Anita's right, I've had the pleasure of spending time talking with Minister, soon-to-be Premier Eby, and he is really interested in knowing what we're going to be doing in Surrey. We're talking about really some innovative projects, and I'm looking forward to working with him and Randy, those federal dollars that you're going to get for us, because that'll be awesome. So from the senior levels of government to the region, from NGOs, and there's some of them, many of them here, to post-secondary schools, and I'll get to that in a minute. If we work together, progress will be made on all these issues. And I can tell you that as an incoming mayor, I will be working very collaboratively. That's my style, and we will achieve results because we cannot do that alone. And I do hear, and I did hear all through this election, the concern about backlogs and those kind of things. And that's something I know that our staff are keen on addressing. I will also be addressing issues with Metro Vancouver and the inequities of not just regional housing that we're seeing at Metro, but also transportation inequities, because that all is part and parcel of what affordability will look like. One of the type of housing that appears to be lacking, certainly in our city, is bridge housing or secondary housing that is there for people who are in the need of that progressing. And we could do better at that, and we will. There is a barrier for people finding permanent housing, and where can one live when in their own safe and dignified space. How can they get there? That's a big challenge for all of us especially for those people leaving recovery situations. I can tell you it wasn't a year ago I met a fellow who was just left hospital. He had the hospital bracelet still on him, and he was an older fella. He had just been to the grocery store carrying his groceries. He was struggling, so I said I'd drive him home. I drove him to where his house was. Turned out his house was a tent in a backyard that somebody rented to him. We can't have that in this city. It's just completely inappropriate, and we will do better. So while we're on the topic, we need to get more accurate numbers of our unhoused population in the city. Every 3 years we do a housing count, and that housing count links us to, does that mean I have to shut up? Okay, yeah, well, kind of. Anyway, we have to do a better job of our housing count. We do a housing count in Metro Vancouver every 3 years. Surrey's housing count was somewhere around 663. I can tell you I can sit in City Hall and I can count 500 just in an area close to City Hall. The numbers aren't even close, so we have to do a better job of the count, because that count is what tells the federal and provincial government our need. And so we need to do a better job of figuring out how we can get that count more accurate. It's very difficult to do in Surrey. I have done the count many times, and it's just a challenge because we're such a large geographic area. But it's crucial that we do better. It may look good for us to have a low number on paper, but at the end of the day, the truth of it is we need the truth. So in order for Surrey to get its proper share of those bridge housing numbers, the ones that the Minister was talking about, we need to make sure that those numbers are accurate. Another area of housing that I think has been overlooked in our city, and it's something I want to try and work on, is for post-secondary students, and especially for international students. And we are seeing that a lot in our city. We get a lot of international students that are living in Surrey. They're going to school, and the schools are charging them more to be here, and we need to make them part of that solution in achieving whatever student housing is going to look like, and we have to be a little more creative in how we're doing that. So, and I'll tell you another story, because I'm kind of full of stories. Some people say I'm full of it, but I am full of stories. There was a house I was asked to come over and check out, and it was a 2-bedroom basement suite. It had 10 students in it. 10 in a 2-bedroom basement. It's not functional, it's not good for the students, and it's certainly not good for neighborhoods, and of course causes all kinds of challenges. So that's why I'm going to be starting a dialogue with the schools. to see if we can see how we can do a better job with them on student housing. There is a lot of moving parts to piece together for Surrey to build the 41,000 new homes that were needed to keep up with growth. That's the number that the housing needs report showed. So within the next 4 years, I can assure you that the City of Surrey will do its part to support new housing creation by streamlining the approval process. We're good. Cutting red tape where we can and creating an even playing field for the building community. It's really important for people to recognize that developers are building the places and spaces we need. You're building homes, and we appreciate that a great deal. I can tell you that when we see shovels in the ground and people moving into their new homes, it's a great result of people all pulling on the same string and working at the same page. There is no doubt that housing is crucial. It certainly is to us in the City of Surrey, in the region, in the province, and I look forward to working together to create an inclusive Surrey where housing options are there for everyone, and I know that the people here will help us achieve that. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is going to be Brenda McKnight. She's the CEO of Vancouver Native Housing Society. Please help me welcome Brenda McKnight.
It's actually nights, not McKnight. That's okay. I was just asked to come this morning due to some other panel members that were ill, so I'll do my best. I did speak at the Vancouver Board of Trade a few weeks ago on the same topic. So, Hechka OCM, I'm from the Kwantlen First Nation. Our territory has a rich history in this area. We once had reserve lands in Surrey at the foot of the Patella Bridge, adjacent to Musqueam, and as well the Royal Kwantlen Park, which was also reserve lands for my nation. In addition to that, we've occupied these lands due to archaeological evidence for more than 10,000 years. And so I'm standing before you today with my ancestors with me. I am a descendant of Grand Chief Waddlecanum of the Kwantlen First Nation and also of Grand Chief Musqueam Pulkai of the Musqueam. Both these chiefs were instrumental in greeting the first visitors to British Columbia. Grand Chief Waddlecanum met the Simon Fraser expedition at the foot of the Patella Bridge where the Kakate village site was. Later relocated the Kwantlen people to present-day Fort Langley in an effort to improve trading relations. So why is it important to know this history in Surrey? Well, it's important as we talk about truth and reconciliation. We all have to understand the path that we've taken and to understand how we've come to where we are today in order to move forward and put reconciliation into action. And that involves all of us coming together. In addition to serving as the CEO for Vancouver Native Housing, and you might wonder, well, why is someone from Vancouver here in Surrey? Well, we are going to be going through a name change, and we do need to look at housing in Surrey. And the reason being is Surrey has the largest urban Indigenous population right now, but is the most underserved. And so we need to fix that. And that's through partnerships with government, with businesses, and I know many of you are here today and want to know how can you help to solve this problem? Well, we all have to work together to be innovative. We heard earlier about the innovative funds. Also, in addition to serving as the CEO for Vancouver Native Housing, I serve on a number of boards. I'm on the Canadian Council for Aboriginal Business, the Law Society of BC, the Metro Vancouver Zero Emissions Innovation Center, the Elizabeth Fries Society, and the New Relationship Trust, which is a foundation helping to build capacity for Indigenous peoples. And through those opportunities, I've been able to gain a lens quite unique in that housing is not just as simple as providing housing to our people. There's much more complex issues that are going on. In our nations, we're growing in governance, and it's challenging. And some of you I know have approached our nations and have had difficulty and have wanted to do developments. Part of our issues with development on reserves is it's only been in recent years that Metro Vancouver has been speaking with our nations. And it's not because they didn't want to, it just was an oversight. And that's due to some previous case law where there were concerns about land claims. But we're beyond that now. Canada has adopted UNDRIP, the province of BC has adopted DRIPA, that's the United Nations Declarations for the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And there's 94 calls to action, and one of them is for Indigenous people to have housing. With my unique lens, having served my nation for 12 years in economic development, and now having worked in the urban setting, I believe that there are 4 keys to success for Indigenous people. We have to have strong governance in our communities, and there are funds right now that are provided for Indigenous communities to work on their governance plans so we can bring that stability. In the urban environment, that means that our Indigenous housing providers, we have to do the best with what we have and be efficient with what monies we have. We also need to give access to our peoples with culture. That culture is so important to help us keep grounded. In my nation, we're taught to live by 7 laws. That's health, happiness, humbleness, generations, generosity, forgiveness, and understanding. It's a code of conduct and how we all work together. And all of us as Canadians, we need to work together to create a new future. When I talk about my culture, I'm talking about what I'm bringing here today. It's my past, it's my history. But each one of you as Canadians also bring value. You also bring culture. And we're creating a new Canadian culture for our future generations. And we say it takes 7 generations for change. I know in Surrey we have a large Indo-Canadian community. And when growing up in Surrey, I've been here my entire life, I was born here. And I remember when I was a young child, I used to think with the South Asian community, how can they live together intergenerationally? Well, as an adult having a child myself and having the opportunity to go home to my community and expose my child to what it means to live intergenerationally, I'm so thankful for that opportunity. Not only is my mother, who's an elder in our community, treated respectfully and feels that she has value, she's also passing on knowledge to my daughter. So we have to be open to these new innovative ways of housing. And intergenerational housing is going to strengthen our youth for the future. So I mentioned four areas: governance, culture, community services. Our people are struggling due to the history of our people being put onto reserve lands, the residential school era, the 60s scoop. And there's many other, we're just opening the door now to learning about the history of Canada. And while many people look today, well, that's the history, that didn't happen in recent years. Well, 1996 was the last year that the last residential school closed. And our children were taken for our community, so when they came home, they didn't know how to parent. And so that trauma has passed on intergenerationally, on and on and on. And so we need to give them supports in terms of counseling, drug and alcohol addiction supports, and so on. The last important piece is economic opportunities. Our nations are hungry and want to work together with the private sector. But also Indigenous people want opportunities, and the way we build capacity is with partnerships. That's why in Canada we recognize that these joint ventures, that 51% Indigenous, those types of partnerships are considered Indigenous businesses. My chief, Marilyn Gabriel, always tells me it's not about a handout, it's about a hand up. And so please don't be afraid to approach our communities, but also don't be afraid to approach our urban Indigenous people that often get forgotten about, our Métis population, our Inuit people. We all are looking for partnerships to grow just like each of you. And I hope that each of you will take the opportunity after today to reach out and see how you can put reconciliation into action. All my relations.
Thank you so much, Brenda. And now, please help me welcome Mr. Doug Tennant, CEO of Unity.
Thank you, Anita. And I'm going to be going like this a few times during the day, and I'm not playing cops and robbers with Baljeet, or maybe I should say RCMP and robbers. Too soon. This is so that Baljeet knows when to turn the slides, because I don't have a clicker. So today I'm going to be talking with you about the state of affordable housing in Surrey, the need, the barriers and the solutions, with some pertinent examples from Unity's experience as a non-profit housing provider in Surrey. So last year when I was here, I told you the sad story of how Harmony, the 6-story inclusive and affordable apartment Unity wanted to build, the most supported affordable housing in BC's history, 5.5 acres we own in South Surrey, was unjustly rejected by the mayor with no reason given and his 4 councillors. So today, ending my speech is going to be a little bit more optimistic, and I'll get to that at the end. So I believe it's very important to acknowledge that developers such as ourselves largely build their housing on the unceded territories of First Nations people. With my organization, we develop housing on the unceded territories of the Semiahmoo, Kwantlen, and Katzie First Nations, and we try to steward their lands in a manner that is inclusive and respectful. And I would add that I'm really pleased to see that Brenda McKnight and Frafka and the Semiahmoo First Nation in Surrey are getting much more involved in housing, because it's very needed and it has to be culturally sensitive. But I have, in discussions with Frafka and Semiahmoo First Nations, certainly offered our help in any way that we can, and also to learn about the housing that they need as well. And my help is largely like, here's 40 pages of the mistakes that we made, don't make those mistakes. So Unity is the partnership of 3 community organizations that help build healthy and inclusive communities. Semiahmoo House Society, we support people with disabilities to live full lives in all aspects of the lives that everybody lives. Peninsula Estates Housing Society, we build affordable and inclusive housing that's reflective of the community. And finally, we have a foundation that supports the work the other 2 organizations do. So there is no doubt, and we've heard some fairly optimistic words, but I'm going to be talking about the reality. And in our Harmony campaign this last year that we were successful with, speaking of the truth was very important, because sometimes people say things that aren't quite true. And there is no doubt that there is a desperate need for affordable housing in the city of Surrey. The Housing Needs Report was very clear. The most pressing housing need for the citizens of this city is below market housing. It's no surprise for us, we receive dozens of calls every week from people being priced out of the neighborhoods they live in Surrey. And you'll see from the income levels on the slide that the demographics of those who need affordable housing has drastically changed in the past 10 years. Something we all need to know. So these are people that could have bought a starter home 10, 20 years ago, and now they're paying more than 30% of their income for rent. And the people who need affordable housing in Surrey, they're the heartbeat of the city. Like, take a look at those income levels. I'd wager that the vast majority of the people that work for your companies fall within those bands. And these are the people that make the city vibrant, diverse and healthy. Practical nurses, construction workers, students, seniors, people with disabilities, young families. Many of them are forced to live in substandard basement suites or must commute hours to work from further up the valley. Imagine how much happier they would be if they could live in quality housing where they work and play. Surrey also has the largest urban population of any city in BC, and you'll see that almost 50% of Indigenous renters are spending more than 30% of their income on rent. And over a third of non-Indigenous renters are in the same boat. And one of the disconnects I often see when talking to decision makers about housing is that they don't tie the data or the needs report to real people. And that's something that we do. We spend our time with real people. And I was so glad that Mayor-elect Brenda Locke has visited and talked with people who have housing needs, so she will be much better positioned to understand what the needs are. So these are some of the real people who need affordable housing for themselves or their loved ones in Surrey. These are the people that Unity learns from as we develop housing that fits their needs and the needs of the city. So Zoltan, the gentleman in the middle of this image, he was evicted from a mobile home park where he lived when it was redeveloped, something that happens fairly often in Surrey. And we were able, through our great affordable or direct, I was going to point at you, but then he'll change the slide, so don't do that. Our great director of inclusive housing, Lise Bougen, was able to find a home, a quality home for Zoltan and 10 other people who were being evicted from trailer park, or sorry, mobile homes. And the others probably had to move far away from where they'd lived their entire lives. Okay, change the slide now. So given the great need for below market rental housing in Surrey, you'd expect that for the last few years, this would be a priority. Unfortunately, the decision makers in place, that was not the case. And the numbers don't lie. While Surrey has pushed through market housing developments, sometimes in the face of community resistance, they've not done the same with co-op or social rental housing. That's the type of housing we build. And it's the type of housing the Housing Need Report explicitly states is the most needed. And it's really quite remarkable. In the 6 years from 2015 to 2021, 245 of those units were developed in Surrey. That's 2% of the total units built. Now let's compare this to the city that Surrey is going to surpass in population in the next few years. The same time period, Vancouver built over 3,000 co-op and social rental units. That's nearly 13 times the number of Surrey. And frankly, we need to do a whole lot better. And think of the human cost of the thousands of Surrey residents who could have had quality rental housing had this been a priority. So of the 245 new social rental units, Unity, my organization, contributed 71 of them through Chorus Apartments. And people like Krista in the bottom right-hand corner of the image, or bottom left-hand corner, bottom right-hand corner of the image, Donna top right, and Jasper and his family top left, they feel very fortunate to have found a quality home they can afford in Chorus, but there's thousands more who need this type of housing. So, how do we start to fix things in Surrey? And to be very frank, I'm going to say that the first step happened on October 15th. We need to have a mayor and council who cares about the thousands of people who can no longer afford housing in this great city. We need a mayor and council who listen to housing experts, believe housing needs reports, and are willing to seek education about housing. The BCMPHA Housing Central Conference takes place this November 21st to 23rd, and I sure hope that the elected leaders of Surrey are there so that they can see what else is going on in other municipalities. There's so much to learn. And very few people are aware that nonprofit housing developers building below market housing are treated no differently than private developers in Surrey. In fact, when we built Chorus in 2016, we actually paid more than a private developer would in DCCs, permits, legal fees associated with a housing agreement, some CRA stuff that we had to do to move things around. So we're building housing at 30% below market on average, paying the same costs the rest of you are. It's no wonder that only 245 social rental units have been built in the past 6 years in Surrey. Surrey needs to waive development cost charges for nonprofit below market housing, contribute land, which they are doing with a great Elizabeth Fry project, and ensure that marginalized people are included in their housing strategies. Official community plans must include a percentage of affordable below market housing. So I've mentioned Chorus a couple times already, and here it is. A beautiful building in South Surrey that won an award of excellence at the Fraser Valley Commercial Building Awards, was selected as one of the top 3 inclusive housing models in Canada by Inclusion Canada. When it was completed in 2016, it was the first purpose-built rental building in Surrey in 3 decades. So we, who don't really consider ourselves a developer, built the first rental building, purpose-built rental building in Surrey in 3 decades. And we did that because our reward is not financial. We're building because we know of the desperate need for this type of housing. We hear about it every day. Chorus has 71 rental homes, 3 that are a 60-year lease, and 20 of those homes spread throughout the building are for tenants with intellectual disabilities, and the other 51 homes are for the people who are the heartbeat of the city. And just to dig a little deeper into the impact of having a house you can call your own, Chorus tenants have a higher quality of life than the average BCer. And that's measured through a scientifically verifiable quality of life survey that we do. Tenants like Jasper and his family, the top left of the image, he can walk to work and his kids can walk to school. Shopping and other essentials are also within a walking distance, so from a business perspective, he's a much happier employee because he can come home and see his kids at lunch. He's not driving 2 hours both ways to work. So Chorus was the model for Harmony, the 6-story affordable Harmony apartment we want to build on 5.5 acres we own in South Surrey. Like Chorus, Harmony is really close to transit, shopping, and all necessary amenities. Harmony was the most supported affordable housing project in BC's history, yet despite that, as I said, it was rejected by its mayor and its 4 councillors last July with no reason being given. However, and here's where our story gets better, what the mayor didn't realize was that Unity was born 65 years ago by a group of parents who were fighting for the right of their disabled kids to be part of the community. So while we were disappointed that we still had to fight this fight, it was an arena that we were very familiar with. And a long story short, the mayor finally agreed that Harmony was a great project 20 days before the election. And Mayor-elect Brenda Locke has supported Harmony since day one. Our new public hearing is set for November 28th, and Harmony will be built. So, at last year's forum, I was feeling a bit of despair, but now, during the past year, things have really been uplifting. So the Harmony campaign that we waged had so many positive impacts, including the opportunity to amplify the voice of the people most impacted. And Lauren Simpson, who you can see there, talking to some pretty important people. It kind of looks like they're holding David Eby hostage there. Oh, here's Lauren right here. And I guess they sort of were, really, because he's been a huge supporter of our housing. So Lauren lived 2 blocks away from where Harmony was to be built. Lauren worked on Surrey Housing Needs Report, put it into plain language, a survey, so that more than 100 people with developmental disabilities were able to participate with it. She called in, she wrote letters, she was not listened to. But the documentary that was created was listened to, watched by thousands of people, and people who watched that understood that the decision was wrong, the decision was unfair, and it needed to be changed. And so, well, here's Lauren, and I'm sure you can talk with her after the presentations, and she can share a bit more about her story. So I've always known that the community supports Unity and the housing that we create, and now I know that we have decision makers in place who will enact changes so that organizations like ours are able to fulfill their mandate and build a city where all people belong. So I'm feeling very good, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Doug. And now please help me welcome the Vice President of Government Relations, Communications and Marketing for the BC Real Estate Association, Mr. Trevor Hargreaves.
Just get my phone set up going here. So I'll just say right off the bat what a pleasure and honor it is to be sharing the stage with such esteemed panelists and diverse perspectives. I think it really speaks to the complexity of housing affordability just when you look at the differences of focus that we're all bringing to the stage when we're speaking today. You know, many of us in the room, we work in the housing sector or the development sector. Aside from that, this is an issue of direct provincial concern. For any of you tonight that are going to meet friends in a restaurant or you happen to find yourself at a house party, the odds are 90% that everyone will gather and talk about one of 3 subjects. Number 1, why did the weather get so bad around here so suddenly? Number 2, what's wrong with the Canucks this season? And number 3, why is it so friggin' expensive to live in this province? I'm not a meteorologist, I can't help you with the weather. We don't have the time to discuss the Canucks. But we very much out of our office, representing the Real Estate Association across the sector, try to deal in pragmatic, practical policy. And that's what I will try to bring to the podium here today as we talk about affordability and what can we do moving forwards. You know, when you look at a crisis, I think taking a step back and just looking at the political landscape in this country, MPs, MLAs, municipal councillors, mayors find themselves very often in this very pressured situation where their constituents are coming to them in a panic and they're saying, fix this, like fix this now, fix it next week, get it fixed. What that's creating is a national crisis that risks making things worse rather than making things better, because it's putting politicians under a lens where they need to hurry. They're throwing things up against the wall to see what sticks, rather than taking the time to do the research, to make sure that solutions to affordability are policy and evidentially based. And that's a real problem. And when you look at really the framework of governance within this country, we have a very republicist attitude. And I'll give you a simple example. If you go to get your driver's license in British Columbia versus getting your driver's license in Alberta, it's a totally separate system. Every province views itself as very special, very unique. If you look at municipalities, you get onto the development subject. Certainly we spend a lot of time talking to different municipalities. What I hear so frequently from municipalities is, oh, you don't understand our needs here. You're not from here. We're very unique. We have very distinct needs. You know, in New Westminster, our needs are very different than Coquitlam's needs. You know, everybody really feels they're on this sort of special, unique scenario. But what we're talking about is a national crisis. It is a crisis from Newfoundland right to the coastal regions of British Columbia. It's a national issue. We have 3 levels of government, and they are not working in close collaboration. The federal government says that they have initiatives, they have recommendations, but they are not showing the level of insight and leadership right down to the municipality level. Municipalities, and I'm glad that when I'm here and I'm criticizing municipalities, I am not criticizing Surrey. Surrey is very much one of the most progressive examples of careful urban planning and development within the province. But many municipalities are openly anti-development. Not only are they anti-development, but the NIMBYist, not in my backyard attitude turns into, I'm going to try to defend this municipality by running for city council. And now you have a no development attitude that's literally within councils across the province. As we move forwards and we try to deal with this as a national issue, it really needs the federal leadership not to say, hey, provinces, lean on your municipalities. The feds need to lean on the municipalities. They need to demonstrate that Salmon Arm has as much of a responsibility around housing affordability as Metro Vancouver. There is no exempt municipality. And what we're not talking about here is blind growth. We don't just need sort of blind expansion. We need careful planning models, but we need all 3 layers of government to figure out how they can work, how they can collaborate, and how leadership can really be top down when it comes to trying to deal with this. I think the other aspect as well on the governmental side, and you heard it today from the housing minister, there is an appetite to collaborate, to look to the private sector, to try to get some ideas. While there is an appetite, there isn't a mechanism to actually do that. If you look at housing affordability, it's a very complex issue. There isn't a single fix. It's going to need a lot of insightful expertise to solve the problem. To be frank, that expertise does not exist within the federal government. It is not within a ministry. It does not exist within the provincial government. It's not within a ministry. A couple of policy analysts working in a ministry are not going to solve these problems. These problems are complex. They need the expertise of the people on the ground. The policy departments in the various associations, be it the private sector, be it the market housing or the non-market housing sector, those are the people that have the insight and the knowledge base to try to solve these problems. What there isn't is a mechanism to bring all of those people together so that they can really address this collectively, so that the government can get all of these ideas, hear an open dialogue, even have the various associations and policy expertise around a table sharing their own ideas to come to new ideas. Those mechanisms do not exist. I come to you today to really state something that we have been pushing the federal government to look at, but it's the implementation of a national roundtable around housing, focused for both market, segment housing, as well as non-market. This is a continuum of housing. If we're trying to address affordability, there is a shortage of supply. There are issues of market housing. We need more market housing made available. We need non-market housing made available. Those interests tend to be very segmented, and everybody is not working together. I think at the end of the day, I really call upon the federal government to look at that. And if you're trying to address this very complex issue, figure out how to get everybody who needs to be sitting around the table, rather than having the government in a very understaffed manner, going, how do we fix this? How do we fix it? Let's try this. How do we fix this? Let's try this. They're doing that at the federal level. They're doing that at the provincial level. There is a better way, evidence-based policy moving forwards. I think I'll leave my comments there today. Certainly, what I will state on behalf of the BC Real Estate Association, we are very interested in ongoingly collaborating on the market housing side as well as the non-market housing side, sharing ideas, sharing expertise, and trying to work together to really come up with practical solutions rather than quick grasping fixes that are really a band-aid solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Trevor. And now, everyone, please help me welcome Tegan Smith, Principal of Channel Consulting.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for such a warm welcome, Anita. Congratulations, Mayor-elect. And it's really an honor to be at this table. Thank you. So again, my name is Tegan Smith, and I'm the principal of Channel Consulting. I'm an urban planner, and the way that I am addressing the housing crisis in BC is through my work as a project facilitator. So I really hold that space between the municipal staff and the project team. I started my company 3 years ago after working in government. So I worked at the City of Richmond, District of North Vancouver, Port of Vancouver, and then I went to work in a private equity firm that invests in real estate. And so, as we've heard today, there's a need for change. I trust that the work that the municipal governments are doing and streamlining, the provincial government is doing with our new premier, that the changes to the development review process, that they will happen, but it's going to take time. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is how applicants can get out of their own way and be a part of the solution in the development approval process. And so I'm going to be talking about specific actions that applicants can take to help address the housing problem. So in my experience, there's really three ways that applicants kind of get in their own way. The first one is incomplete submissions. The second one is having a lack of knowledge around the requirements. And the third one is this us versus them mindset. So starting off with the first one, the incomplete submissions. So one thing that I know for certain is that the relative speed of the review is driven by the quality of the submissions. And so incomplete submissions are a major problem, and a number of the development review process findings have been around the intake process, the opportunities for improvements at the intake process. And so when I was working in government, I found that about 80% of the applications that came in were actually incomplete. Then when I was working on the private sector side, I saw that project leaders and subject matter experts really felt rushed to get their application in because there was a belief that it would be beneficial to get that application into the queue. Okay? And so there's this kind of misconception there. So when I was working as manager of planning and development in a government organization, I had 145 projects under me, 11 direct reports. Most of the planners were new, they needed training. And so I was very intentional to figure out how are we actually spending our time? Which files are we actually going to be looking at? And there's a big stack. The stack's getting bigger every day. And so the relatively poor submissions were given a relatively low level of priority. And so we prioritized those projects that were ready for approval. Okay, so number one, complete your submission. Number two, the second way that applicants can get in their own way is that lack of knowledge around the requirements. So when applicants and their consultants are unclear about all of the layers of policy and the various stakeholders that are involved, the submissions end up being poor quality. So there are no easy development sites left. We all know that. Everyone in this room knows that. Most projects are redevelopments, or they're in proximity to environmentally sensitive areas. And so because of this, on top of municipal policy, most projects are also going through review with FLINRO and the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Transportation and the ALC and the Port, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, and Indigenous engagement. And I get it. It is truly, it's not easy to know all the rules. It's really, really tough. However, the reality is that the submission that have technical deficiencies, they go through rounds and rounds of review and comments. And those extra rounds of review and comments, which we all know about, we've all seen those review letters, they're a problem. And they're a problem for both the review team and for the project team. The additional iterations of comments, they cost government staff resources, okay? And we all know that those additional rounds of comments cause delay, which is a killer for a business plan for your development project. Sadly, this happens all the time. Okay, submissions go into the city and they don't align with the land use policy. So here's a story, and I get these phone calls, and I know some of my other colleagues probably get very similar phone calls all the time. A gentleman phoned me in absolute despair 2 weeks ago. He had invested $300,000 of his family's money in preparing a design for a rental housing project, okay? The project was not designed in consideration of the specific local area policies. So he learned that when he got his first review letter back from the city. And this happens time and time again, where architects, environmental professionals, engineering, really super focused on the subject matter expertise, which is awesome, but they don't fully align to the approval criteria. So you need to have someone on your team who is ensuring that the submission addresses all of the rules from the outset. So that's hack number 2. Okay, number 3. The third way that applicants get in their own way is bringing that us versus them mentality. It's the old finger pointing thing. So some applicants get really frustrated, and like we've, probably all of us, most of the people in the room have had these kinds of frustrations with the red tape that we were talking about earlier. They get bad news. They find out a surprise. And then the strategy is, I'm going to try and phone and bully the city. I tell you from first-hand experience, the grouchy folks, they're the last one that get a return phone call or email. Okay, so on the other hand, applicants that work independently with their subject matter team, they bring home a really great solution. Those are the projects that progress, bringing the solution. For me personally, just with all the projects that my company is working on right now, we speak the language. Calls and emails normally returned in 1 to 2 hours, not even 24 hours. We don't wait mostly for written comments. On the other hand, the grouchy guy is going to be waiting for months to get that review letter for when the planner actually has time to write up the feedback. So the development review and approvals process is, and we talked about this, we've heard about this, about working together. It's about partnership. It truly is. The truth is that the municipal planners, they take pride in their work. Planners need to be supported with high quality information. And that is how you're going to get to a decision. So in this climate right now, it's a very difficult time. We've got rising construction costs, interest rates, inflation, private developers, and nonprofits. They're having the exact same problems. Government to government, infrastructure projects, facing the same problems. All project leaders really need to be proactive and showing up prepared to work with cities. Great Resignation has had an enormous impact on government. There's never been fewer staff. We've got unemployment in Metro Vancouver, historical 3.9%, low. We've got 46,000 vacant positions in the region. Municipal teams are desperately understaffed. So finding ways to be supportive it's the winning ticket. It's really important. So just wrapping up here, if you want to bring leadership to the housing crisis, if you want to do something, my advice is, one, prepare a complete development application that meets the criteria that it's going to be reviewed against. Two, support the planner and subject matter experts with summaries that include relevant policy references, local precedents. An easy win is a cover sheet that explains how the submission addresses previous feedback and how it meets the intent of the policy. Number three, make the municipal planner's job easy by providing technical solutions that they can actually act on. If you need help, there's actually 3 workbooks and training videos. They're on the Channel Consulting website, channelconsulting.ca/media. There's a book and appointment button there. I trust that the provincial government, we've got the federal funding for streamlining, municipalities are working to improve the development review process, and we all have a role to be involved in that. However, change led by government, it takes time. So there's a huge opportunity for applicants to help address the housing problem, prepare complete submissions, know the land use regulations, and bring solutions. Thank you.
Everyone, we have time for 10 minutes for audience participation. We have a microphone in the middle of the room. If you have any questions or comments, please indicate them very succinctly. So if you can go to the microphone. But I'm going to ask the first question actually to Mayor-elect Locke. You know, the Surrey Board of Trade, we are calling on the City of Surrey for a renewed economic and jobs plan. Is housing going to be a part of that renewed economic and jobs plan?
Thank you, Anita, just remembering the honeymoon and the elect word. But absolutely, housing is just crucial to all of us in Metro Vancouver, and certainly no different for Surrey, so it absolutely is. We recognize that, and we've had those discussions already. And I have had the privilege to talk at length with Minister, now Premier, soon to be Premier Eby, about this very thing, so absolutely.
Any questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Go ahead to the microphone, please.
There's some very good points that have been made up at the front, and one of the biggest ones that came across is the unity of the different levels of government working together to solve this challenge. This challenge is absolutely enormous. Everybody admits it. We know we're 1 million to 2 million houses short, something like that. We're going to have record immigration this year, next year, the year after. I know the development community in this room and everywhere else wants to help solve this problem. We want to be leaders in working with municipal governments, provincial governments, federal governments in solving this problem. We need everybody to work together. I want to encourage everybody in this room, you need to reach out to all your elected representatives from all levels of government. We need to push this issue, and we need to get unity and everybody working together. There are solutions. We have solutions. The development industry has solutions. We can solve this problem, but we need to work together. And I know that my heart's in this. I know everybody else's heart is in this room is in it too. And we really, really need to solve this problem, or else it's going to be catastrophic. The interest rate policy that the government is moving right now is canceling tens of thousands of rental projects of units across this country. They're getting canceled. That can be fixed. So the government can target interest rate policy directly for rentals and affordable rentals. I encourage you to reach out to the minister, the finance minister, the prime minister. They can change that in 1 hour.
Panelists, did you want to respond? Any of you? Trevor?
I very much agree, and I think on that topic of unity, and I think from my perspective, where the federal and provincial governments can really assist municipalities, when you're talking about development, the municipal perspective is often, we're building at an appropriate rate. There's this many people, we're building at the appropriate rate. But the planning model needs to be building for who is coming, not who is here today. And that means thinking a decade ahead. That means thinking way ahead. And as referenced by the minister earlier in the day, we've had the lowest housing starts in the G7 for upwards of 15 years. We're the slowest producing Western nation, so we know we're well behind the map. But even on things like immigration, the government is upping immigration targets, saying we need to expand development, but that's also going to cause labor shortages, but not giving thought to the immigration. How can you fast track people that have the demonstrated skills to bring through? So the careful thought process is rarely there. But again, those mechanisms of how do we all work together? The will is there, the knowledge is there, but what's the actual process to synthesize all the expertise that we all have and then have it trickle down to government? I think that's where the focus really needs to be.
Any other comments from the panelists? Tegan?
Yeah, thank you, Trevor. And I have a comment on that as well in terms of the different levels of government. I mentioned the fact that there are no easy sites left, and I mentioned all of the levels of government that are involved in many of our applications. So we have, contaminated site regulation, Ministry of Environment. We have FLNRO dealing with riparian areas. We have all of these different groups that we are liaising with on files in addition to the municipality. And truly, it is those provincial regulations that hold things up. And so I think we need to be having those candid conversations and with the province around how do we not only streamline the municipal review process, but streamline the coordination between the levels of government in the review process in order that we can streamline these projects and make, quite frankly, more efficient use of the municipal staff time in these projects.
Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Brenda, I have a question for you. What advice do you have to the audience who want to work on creating communities with our Indigenous partners? What's your advice relating to that? There's been so many great examples in the past.
We do have some, we just passed a new housing project, I think on the 3rd, that was an Indigenous project, so I'm excited about that. One of the things that I was going to say, and one of the things I think we can do, and it gets back to getting all levels of government together. I had put together a couple years ago a housing summit that we were going to do in the city of Surrey. Unfortunately, COVID put a big block on that, as they did with so many things. But I'm going to re-erect that, and lots of those partners, and I'll be talking to you about it as well, Anita. But I did talk to Premier Eby about it as well, and that it would be very specific and only for Surrey, that we will do something here. It will include those other partners, but it will include absolutely both the land-based, the urban Indigenous people, and as well as Métis and other folks that are here living in Surrey. So I'm hopeful to do that. I'm hopeful to do that before in the spring sometime. So that's something that I think we could do moving forward. And that's about getting everybody on the same page. So I appreciated what Sean said, because that's something that we need to be talking about.
Thank you. Brendan Knight, do you have a perspective as well?
Hi, thank you. Yes, it's confusing with the two Brendas at the table, but yeah, there's some innovative ways that we can work with developers in the urban setting. I mean, some cities have policies where when we have developments with the private sector, that there's a percentage of that development that goes to social housing. And so it becomes a win-win situation. In many cases, the developer is allowed to build up higher density, and so they benefit economically, and then we create social housing. So I think those types of partnerships need to be looked at, and our local government needs to implement these types of policies to support those kinds of unique developments.
A question from the audience. Thank you, Brenda. Yep. I think if you can ask her to go first.
Sorry.
Hi there. I am an employment counselor and have been in employment business in sector since over 2000, since 2000. And what needs to happen is the definition of what is affordable. What is the salary of affordable housing? Unity's had under 35,000. I work with people who are getting paid $17 an hour, working 40 hours a week. That is like $30,000 a year, between $25,000 and $30,000 a year. That's affordable housing. And so that's if you look at homelessness, there's a great length to actually describe what the continuum was from absolute to house. And that same care has to happen with defining the affordable housing and what are our targets. Because somebody earning $30 an hour can afford something way different than somebody working at $16, $20 an hour. So that's part of the conversation around affordable housing that we need to keep in the back of our mind.
Any comments from the panelists on that? Doug?
Yeah, I agree completely that affordable housing is misunderstood and has a multiplicity of definitions, and that works against the work we're trying to do. Is it social housing? Is it first stage housing, etc.? The housing that we build, and the definition that I would give, which is also BC Housing given, that affordable housing is 30% of your income. So whatever you're making, 30% of your income. And the housing we build is never going to warehouse a certain group of people altogether. That doesn't work. That's not how cities work. Our housing is always going to have people that are reflective of the community, making up to a certain amount of money. So for Harmony, for example, 20% of the homes will be at shelter rate. That's $375 a month. So that's for people with disabilities and others who that's the amount of money that they get for rent. 50% of the rentals will be at rent geared to income, but at incomes below 50, sort of 60,000 for families, a bit lower than that for single people, so they will only ever pay 30% of their income for housing, and then 30% is close to market, and we want that. We want teachers, firefighters, other people where they still can't necessarily purchase a house, but we want to have a wide variety of people living in our housing, because that to us is a much healthier model.
Final question, Sharon.
Chair and Kathy, a great event to meet. Anita, thank you so much for putting this together. Really appreciate it, and I like the honest conversation ahead as well. Me being a developer in Valley, we've done more than 516 units so far, with another 1,625 under planning. One of the things we found out through the whole process the last 12, 14 years is that every building we do, it costs us more. More rules and regulations come in. The latest one has been hitting us really badly, which has increased our cost of construction by 18%, is step code. Step code is so onerous on the whole development system itself. And with the wood frame, this is more of a technical question, maybe it can be answered later, but it's such wood frame buildings cannot be sealed as they are being sealed right now, because they will rot after about 10, 15 years. Then we'll have a major problem later on. So my question is basically is how can we keep the cost of construction at some sort of a fair level, instead of every building that we do, it increases, it increases, it increases. Yet on the other side, we keep on talking about trying to provide some affordable housing, which goes against the whole conversation. Thank you.
Any comments from the panelists? Don't be too depressed by that. Well, everyone, thank you so much. We have so much work to do, and we're going to have a housing summit here in the city of Surrey where we can identify those solutions, collaborate, work together. So stay tuned for that information. Thank you so much to our co-presenting sponsors, Century Group and Rogers Business, our lunch sponsor. The BM Group of companies are supporting sponsors, Applin and Martin Consultants, Blue City Construction, the Tien Share Group of companies, Unity, our community sponsors, BC Housing, the Fraser Valley Real Estate Board, and LMS Reinforcing Steel. Thank you so much. Make it a great business day, everyone. Thank you for attending.